Rain hammered against the windshield as David pulled into the parking lot of the corner store. His old truck coughed before finally going quiet. He sat there for a moment, counting the crumpled bills in his wallet. $15.37. Had to make it last until Friday. His son Tommy was waiting at home, probably already wondering where dinner was. At 7 years old, the boy never complained, but David could see the questions in his eyes sometimes. Why don't we eat out like other families? Why can't we get the name brand cereal? David grabbed his jacket and ran through the rain to the store entrance. The bell jingled as he walked in, shaking water from his hair. The owner, Mr. Kim, looked up from behind the counter and gave him a friendly nod. "Evening, David. How's the boy?" "Good, thanks. Just picking up a few things." David made his way to the back where they kept the marked-down items. Day-old bread, dented cans, produce that was still good but didn't look perfect anymore. This was where he did most of his shopping these days. He picked up a loaf of bread, some soup cans, and a small container of milk that was close to its sell-by date. At the counter, Mr. Kim rang up his items without comment. The man had been kind to David ever since he'd started coming here 6 months ago, after losing his job at the factory. Construction work was harder to find than people thought, especially when you had to be home by 6 to pick up your kid from the neighbor's house. "That'll be $12.50, Mr. Kim said. David handed over the money and gathered his small bag of groceries. As he headed for the door, he noticed Mr. Kim looking out the window with a worried expression. "Everything okay?" David asked. Mr. Kim pointed outside. "Those two girls have been sitting out there for over an hour. In this rain. I asked if they were okay, but they just said they're waiting for someone." David looked through the glass door. On the bench outside, 2 young girls sat huddled together under what looked like a school blazer. They couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old. The rain was coming down sideways now and they were getting soaked. "Did you call anyone?" David asked. "I thought about calling the police, but the girls said their father was coming. I don't want to make trouble if it's just a misunderstanding." David watched the girls for another moment. Something about the way they sat so still, trying to stay brave, reminded him of himself at that age, waiting and hoping someone would show up who never did. "I'll talk to them," he said. The rain hit him like a cold slap as he stepped outside. The girls looked up as he approached. Even in the dim streetlight, he could see they were identical twins. Their clothes were expensive looking, the kind of outfits that cost more than David made in a week. But they were drenched and shivering. "Hey there," David said, trying to sound friendly but not scary. "I'm David. Mr. Kim inside is worried about you two. Are you waiting for someone?" The girl on the left spoke first. "Our father is supposed to pick us up. He said he'd be here at 5. David glanced at his watch. It was almost 8:30. "Maybe he got held up in traffic?" David suggested. "Do you have a phone number I could call?" The girls exchanged a look. The one on the right pulled out an expensive-looking phone from her jacket pocket. "We tried calling, but it goes straight to voicemail. He's probably just running late." But even as she said it, David could hear the doubt in her voice. These kids were trying to convince themselves as much as him. "What are your names?" he asked, sitting down on the edge of the bench. "I'm Amy," said the girl with the phone. "This is Anna. Nice to meet you both. Look, I don't want to scare you, but it's getting pretty late, and this rain isn't stopping anytime soon. Do you have anywhere else you can go? Maybe your mom?" Amy shook her head. "It's just our father. Our mother passed away when we were little." David felt his heart sink. He knew what it was like to lose a parent. Tommy's mother had died in a car accident when the boy was 3. They'd been making it work together ever since, but some days were harder than others. What about other family? Grandparents? An aunt or uncle? "Our grandparents live in Europe," Anna said quietly. "And our father doesn't really talk to the rest of the family." David looked at these 2 small girls sitting in the rain with nowhere to go. He thought about Tommy at home, probably making himself a peanut butter sandwich for dinner because David was taking so long. He thought about their tiny apartment with its leaky faucet and noisy heater. He thought about the $15 he had left until payday. Then he thought about spending the night wondering if 2 little girls were safe and warm somewhere. "Listen," he said, "I live just a few minutes from here. Why don't you come stay at my place tonight? We can keep trying to reach your father, and if we can't get hold of him, we'll figure out what to do in the morning." The girls looked at each other again. David could see them having some kind of silent conversation that only twins could have. "Our father told us never to go with strangers," Amy said carefully. That's good advice, David agreed. And you're smart to remember it. How about this? Let's go back inside and talk to Mr. Kim. He's known me for months. He can tell you I'm not a bad guy. And you can call your father's number one more time. If he answers, great. If not, at least you'll be warm and dry while we figure things out. The girls seemed to consider this. Finally, Anna nodded. Okay, but just until our father comes. Back inside the store, Mr. Kim confirmed that David was good people and that his little boy was well-behaved and polite. The girls tried calling their father again, but the phone went straight to voicemail. All right, David said. Let's get you somewhere warm. The drive to his apartment was quiet. The girls sat in the back seat, still holding hands. David caught glimpses of them in his rearview mirror, looking around at his old truck with curiosity but no judgment. When they pulled up to his apartment building, David felt a wave of embarrassment. The place looked even more run down in the rain, but the girls climbed out without complaint and followed him up the stairs to the second floor. Dad, Tommy called out when David opened the door. The boy appeared in the hallway, wearing his favorite dinosaur pajamas. He stopped short when he saw the two girls. Tommy, these are Amy and Anna, David said. They're going to stay with us tonight. Their father got held up and they needed somewhere warm to wait. Tommy looked at the girls with wide eyes. Are you twins? Amy smiled for the first time since David had met her. Yes, we are. That's so cool, Tommy said. I always wanted a brother or sister. As David watched his son chatting excitedly with the two girls, he wondered what he'd gotten himself into. But seeing the relief on their faces as they stepped into the warm apartment, he knew he'd made the right choice, even if he had no idea just how much this one night would change all of their lives. The first thing David noticed was how the girls looked around his small apartment. Not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity. Amy ran her fingers along the worn fabric of his couch, while Anna studied the stack of library books on the coffee table. Your home is cozy, Anna said, and David could tell she meant it. Tommy had already claimed his role as tour guide. This is our living room, and that's the kitchen over there. Dad makes really good pancakes on Saturdays. Do you like pancakes? We've never had homemade ones, Amy admitted. Our cook usually makes crepes for breakfast. David raised an eyebrow. A cook? These girls were definitely not from his neighborhood. Are you hungry? He asked. I was about to make some soup and sandwiches. The twins nodded eagerly. David noticed they had perfect manners, the kind you only learned from expensive schools or careful upbringing. They offered to help in the kitchen, something that surprised him. Most kids their age just expected to be served. As David heated up the soup, Amy and Anna helped Tommy set the table. They worked together like they'd known each other for years, not just met 20 minutes ago. Where do you girls go to school? David asked as they sat down to eat. Westfield Academy, Anna replied. It's a private school across town. David nearly choked on his soup. Westfield Academy was where rich people sent their kids. The tuition cost more than David made in a year. That's fancy, Tommy said, clearly impressed. Do you wear uniforms? Yes, but they're not very comfortable, Amy said, tugging at her still damp blazer. These clothes are getting cold. Do you have anything we could borrow? David looked at the expensive fabric and designer labels on their clothes. Everything they wore probably cost more than his entire wardrobe. But they were shivering, and that was what mattered. Tommy, go grab some of your older clothes from the box under your bed, the ones that got too small. Tommy ran off excitedly. David had saved some of his son's outgrown clothes, thinking he might donate them eventually. Now he was glad he'd kept them. While Tommy searched for clothes, David tried the girl's father's number again. Still voicemail. The message was brief and professional. You've reached Richard Blackwell. Leave a message. Mr. Blackwell, David said after the beep. This is David Chen. I have your daughters Amy and Anna with me. They've been waiting for you since 5 o'clock. Please call me back as soon as you get this. He left his number and hung up. Does your father work late often? David asked gently. The girls exchanged another one of their silent twin conversations. Recently, yes, Amy said carefully. He's been very busy with his business. Sometimes he has to travel suddenly. What kind of business? Real estate, Anna said. He buys and sells big buildings. Office towers, shopping centers, things like that, David nodded. That explained the expensive clothes and private school. Real estate developers could make serious money if they were successful. Tommy returned with an armload of clothes. Here, these should fit. The girls changed into Tommy's old t-shirts and sweatpants. The clothes were too big and mismatched, but Amy and Anna seemed delighted with them. These are so soft, Anna said, pulling at the cotton fabric, and warm. You can keep them if you want, Tommy offered generously. After dinner, the three kids settled on the couch to watch cartoons. David cleaned up the kitchen, keeping one ear on their conversation. He was learning more about the girls' lives, and some of it worried him. Our house has 12 bedrooms, Amy was telling Tommy, but most of them are empty. We usually just stay in our wing with our nanny. You have a nanny? Tommy asked. We did, Anna said quietly, but Father let her go last week. He said we were old enough to take care of ourselves after school. David frowned. 9-year-old girls left alone after school? In a mansion with 12 bedrooms? What kind of father did that? Don't you get scared in such a big house by yourselves? Tommy asked. Sometimes, Amy admitted. But we have each other. We always have each other. The way she said it made David's heart ache. These girls had money, but they seemed lonelier than Tommy, who'd never had much of anything. As the evening went on, David learned more. The girls talked about their father's frequent business trips, sometimes lasting weeks. They mentioned expensive vacations to places like Switzerland and Japan, but always with nannies or tutors, never just with their father. They spoke about having everything they could want: horses, piano lessons, a movie theater in their basement. But David could hear the emptiness behind their words. What about friends? David asked during a commercial break. Do you have kids you like to play with? The girls got quiet. Not really, Anna said finally. Westfield is very focused on academics, and Father says we shouldn't get too attached to people who aren't. Well, like us, like you, how? You know, Amy said uncomfortably. From the same kind of families. David felt anger rise in his chest. What kind of man taught his daughters that they were better than other people? But he kept his voice calm. That's too bad. Some of the best people I know don't have much money. Like you, Tommy said matter-of-factly. Dad's the best person ever and we don't have much money. The simplicity of his son's statement made David smile. Out of the mouths of babes. As bedtime approached, David set up sleeping bags in Tommy's room. The girls seemed excited about this adventure. Like it was camping. We've never shared a room with anyone except each other, Anna said as they brushed their teeth with spare toothbrushes David found in his medicine cabinet. It'll be fun, Tommy assured them. Sometimes when I can't sleep, Dad tells stories about when he was little. Would you tell us a story too? Amy asked David hopefully. So David found himself sitting on Tommy's bedroom floor, 3 kids in sleeping bags looking up at him expectantly. He told them about growing up with his grandmother, who barely spoke English but made the best dumplings in Chinatown. He talked about learning to fix things with his hands, about how his grandmother taught him that being poor didn't mean being less than anyone else. The girls listened with fascination, like he was describing life on another planet, which David realized he probably was. Their world and his were so different they might as well be from different countries. As the kids drifted off to sleep, David tried calling the girl's father one more time. Still voicemail. He looked at the time, almost midnight. What kind of emergency business meeting lasted this long? He tucked the phone number away and settled onto the couch with a blanket. Tomorrow he'd have to make some decisions. If their father didn't show up, he'd need to call social services. The thought made his stomach twist. These girls had been through enough. But as he lay there listening to the soft breathing from Tommy's room, David couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. Rich kids didn't usually end up abandoned at convenience stores. And the way Amy and Anna talked about their father with careful, measured words suggested they were used to being disappointed by him. David stared at the ceiling, wondering what tomorrow would bring. All he'd wanted was to help 2 kids get out of the rain. Now he was responsible for 3 children, and he had no idea if their father was coming back at all. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean and carrying away the day's troubles. But inside the small apartment, 4 people who'd been strangers just hours before were learning what it meant to be a family, even if just for one night. David woke up to the smell of something burning. He jumped off the couch and rushed to the kitchen where he found Tommy standing on a chair at the stove, trying to flip what looked like pancakes. Amy and Anna stood nearby watching with worried expressions. "Tommy, what are you doing?" David asked, quickly turning off the burner. I wanted to make breakfast for Amy and Anna, Tommy said, his bottom lip trembling. Like you do for me on Saturdays. But they're all black. David looked at the pan. The pancakes were indeed charcoal, but when he saw his son's disappointed face, he couldn't help but smile. That's very sweet of you, buddy. Next time let's cook together, okay? He ruffled Tommy's hair. How about I make some real pancakes now? We tried to stop him, Amy said quickly, but he wanted to surprise you. It's okay, David said. Tommy has a big heart. Sometimes it gets ahead of his cooking skills. As David mixed fresh batter, the girls helped clean up Tommy's mess. They worked together like a team, and David noticed how natural it seemed. It was hard to believe they'd only known each other for 12 hours. Did anyone try calling your father this morning? David asked. Anna nodded. Amy called twice. Still no answer. David felt a knot forming in his stomach. A man didn't just disappear overnight without some kind of explanation. Something was wrong. After breakfast, David made a decision he'd been putting off. Girls, I think we need to go to your house. Maybe your father came home during the night and doesn't know where you are. The twins looked at each other with that silent communication again. He has our phone number, Amy said quietly. If he was looking for us, he would have called. But David needed to see for himself. He called his work and told them he had a family emergency. His supervisor wasn't happy about the short notice, but David had never missed work before, so they gave him the day off. Can I come too? Tommy asked as they got ready to leave. Of course. We're all in this together now. The drive across town took 30 minutes. David watched through his rearview mirror as the neighborhoods changed from rundown apartments to nice houses to massive estates. By the time they reached the girl's address, he felt like he'd driven into a different world. The Blackwell house wasn't just big. It was enormous. A long driveway curved through perfectly manicured lawns to a mansion that looked like something from a movie. David's entire apartment building could fit in the front yard. This is where you live? Tommy whispered, his face pressed against the window. Yes, Anna said, but she didn't sound happy about it. David pulled up to the front door. The driveway was empty except for a pile of newspapers that hadn't been collected. That was not a good sign. They walked to the front door together. Amy pulled out a key from her pocket, a key that looked more expensive than most jewelry David had ever seen. Are you sure it's okay for us to go in? David asked. It's our house, Amy said, but her voice was small. The inside of the mansion was even more impressive than the outside. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, paintings that looked like they belonged in museums. Tommy's mouth hung open as he looked around. Dad? Amy called out. Dad, are you home? Her voice echoed through empty hallways. No answer. They walked through room after room. A formal dining room with a table that could seat 20 people. A library with books from floor to ceiling. A game room with a pool table and arcade machines. Everything was clean and perfect, but it felt cold and empty. Where are your bedrooms? David asked. Anna led them upstairs and down a long hallway. She opened a door to reveal a bedroom that was bigger than David's entire apartment. 2 identical beds with expensive furniture and enough toys to fill a toy store. But despite all the fancy things, it felt lonely. This is beautiful, David said, trying to be positive. We don't really play with most of this stuff, Amy said, gesturing at the toys. Father buys us things, but he doesn't really know what we like. They checked the master bedroom at the end of the hall. The bed was made and everything looked untouched. Wherever Richard Blackwell was, he hadn't been home last night. Back downstairs, David noticed a home office with the door slightly open. Inside, papers were scattered across a large desk. Something made him look closer. Girls, maybe you should wait in the living room with Tommy, he said. But Amy was already reading over his shoulder. Those are newspaper clippings, she said quietly. David picked up one of the papers. The headline made his blood run cold. Local developer under investigation for fraud. Below it was a photo of a man in an expensive suit. Richard Blackwell. There were more headlines. Blackwell Properties accused of money laundering. FBI raids real estate mogul's office. Investors demand answers from missing developer. The dates on the articles went back several weeks. The most recent one was from yesterday. Richard Blackwell disappears as federal charges loom. David felt sick. These little girls' father wasn't just missing, he was running from the law. Amy, he said gently, did your father say anything about going away? Or about any problems at work? Amy's eyes filled with tears. He's been acting strange for weeks. He had lots of phone calls that made him angry. And he fired all the staff except the cleaning lady who comes twice a week. Is that why he fired your nanny? Anna nodded. He said we couldn't afford her anymore. But that doesn't make sense, does it? Look at this house. David didn't know how to explain that sometimes people who looked rich on the outside were actually broke. Or worse, that sometimes they got their money in ways that weren't legal. A knock at the front door made them all jump. David looked through the window and saw a police car in the driveway. Stay here, he told the kids, but they followed him anyway. David opened the door to find 2 police officers on the front steps. Good morning, the older officer said. We're looking for Richard Blackwell. Are you family? I'm David Chen. These are his daughters. Mr. Blackwell isn't here. The officer looked at the girls with sympathy. How long has he been gone? Since yesterday afternoon, Amy said in a small voice. Maybe longer. The officers exchanged a look. Sir, could we speak with you privately? David turned to the kids. Go wait in the living room. I'll be right there. When the children were out of earshot, the older officer spoke quietly. Mr. Chen, Richard Blackwell is wanted by the FBI for federal fraud charges. There's a warrant for his arrest. We've been watching this house, and when we saw cars in the driveway, we thought he might have come back. The girls have been with me since yesterday evening, David explained. They were waiting for him at a store and he never showed up. Are you a relative? No, I couldn't leave them sitting in the rain. The younger officer looked surprised. You took in 2 strangers overnight? They're just kids. They needed help. The officers asked David for his information and ran a quick background check on their radio. When it came back clean, they relaxed a bit. Mr. Chen, we're going to need to contact Child Services, the older officer said. These girls can't stay here alone and their father might not be coming back anytime soon. David's heart sank. He thought about Amy and Anna being split up and sent to different foster homes. He thought about how scared they must be, learning that their father was a criminal. How long does Child Services usually take? He asked. A few hours, maybe. They'll need to place the girls somewhere safe while they figure out a long-term plan. David looked through the doorway at the 3 kids sitting together on the enormous couch. Tommy was showing Amy and Anna something on his phone, and they were all laughing. In the middle of all this chaos and fear, they had found something to smile about. Officer, David said, I know this might sound crazy, but is there any way the girls could stay with me while this gets sorted out? They're scared and they trust me. It might be easier for everyone. The officers looked at each other again. That's not really how these things work, the younger one said. But the older officer studied David's face. You really care about these kids, don't you? They're good girls. They shouldn't have to pay for their father's mistakes. Let me make some calls, the officer said. No promises, but maybe we can work something out. As David waited, he wondered what he was getting himself into. But when he looked at Amy and Anna, he knew he couldn't let them face this alone. Everything was about to change for all of them. The social worker's name was Mrs. Rodriguez, and she had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She sat across from David in his small living room, a stack of paperwork balanced on her lap. Amy and Anna perched on either side of him on the couch, while Tommy sat cross-legged on the floor, pretending to color but clearly listening to every word. Mr. Chen, I have to be honest with you, Mrs. Rodriguez said. What you're asking to do isn't simple. Becoming a temporary guardian for children who aren't related to you requires background checks, home inspections, and court approval. How long does that take? David asked. Normally? Several weeks, maybe months. David felt Amy's hand slip into his. On his other side, Anna moved closer. These girls had already been through so much. The thought of them spending weeks in foster care while paperwork moved through the system made his chest tight. But, Mrs. Rodriguez continued, Officer Martinez spoke very highly of you, and frankly, the girls are clearly attached to you already. In cases like this, we sometimes make emergency arrangements. What kind of arrangements? If you pass the initial background check and home safety inspection, I can approve a temporary placement for 30 days. That gives us time to do the full investigation while keeping the girls in a stable environment. Amy squeezed David's hand. Does that mean we can stay? If Mr. Chen agrees to it, yes. But there are rules. He'll need to enroll you in school, make sure you have medical care, and work with our office on regular check-ins. David thought about his budget, feeding and clothing 2 more children, school supplies, doctor visits if they got sick, His construction job barely covered expenses for him and Tommy. "I know it's a lot to think about," Mrs. Rodriguez said, reading his expression. "There is some financial assistance available for emergency guardianship situations." "It's not about the money," David said, and he realized it was true. "I just want to make sure I can give them what they need." "You already are," Anna said quietly. "You're giving us a family." 2 hours later, after forms were signed and appointments scheduled, Mrs. Rodriguez left. The house felt different with her gone, more official somehow. David was now legally responsible for Amy and Anna, at least for the next month, so what happens now? Amy asked. "Now we figure out how to be a family," David said, "starting with getting you enrolled in Tommy's school." The next morning, David took all 3 kids to Lincoln Elementary. The principal, Mrs. Thompson, looked surprised when David explained the situation, but she was understanding. "We've had emergency placements before," she said. "The girls can start tomorrow. We'll need to get them some school supplies." At the store afterward, David watched Amy and Anna marvel at things Tommy took for granted. Regular pencils instead of expensive fountain pens, backpacks from the discount rack instead of designer bags. They seemed delighted by everything. "Can we really pick any backpack we want?" Anna asked, running her fingers over a bright purple one with cartoon cats. "Of course. It's yours." Amy chose a green backpack covered in stars. As they walked to the checkout, she tugged on David's sleeve. "David, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why are you doing this?" "Taking care of us, I mean. You don't really know us." David stopped walking. The question caught him off guard. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because the answer was so simple. "Because you needed help, and I could help. That's what people do for each other. Our father always said people only help others when they want something in return." David knelt down so he was at eye level with both girls. "Your father was wrong about that. Some people help because it's the right thing to do. No other reason." That evening, David got a call from his supervisor at the construction company. "Chen, we heard about your situation," his boss, Mr. Williams, said, taking in those kids and all. "That's a good thing you're doing." "Thank you, sir. Thing is, we've got a new project starting next month. Office building downtown. We need someone to supervise the electrical work. It's a promotion, more money, better hours. You interested?" David almost dropped the phone. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. You've been reliable for 6 months and the crew respects you. Plus, the better schedule means you can be home when the kids get out of school." The promotion meant David could stop worrying about paying for groceries. It meant Amy and Anna could have new clothes instead of hand-me-downs. Most importantly, it meant he could provide for his growing family without constant stress. 3 weeks into their new arrangement, David was amazed at how normal everything felt. Amy and Anna had settled into Lincoln Elementary like they'd always been there. Their teacher, Miss Parker, said they were bright and helpful, though sometimes seemed overwhelmed by how loud and chaotic a regular classroom could be, compared to their private school. At home, the girls had taken on responsibilities without being asked. Amy helped Tommy with his homework every evening, while Anna discovered she loved cooking. Simple things like scrambled eggs and grilled cheese, but she approached each meal like it was a gourmet experiment. "I never got to cook before," she explained to David one evening as she carefully flipped sandwiches in the pan. "Our cook said the kitchen was too dangerous for children." "Do you miss your old life?" David asked. It was something he'd been wondering about but hadn't wanted to bring up. Anna thought about it while she arranged the sandwiches on plates. "I miss some things. Our horses. The library. The swimming pool. But I like this better. In our old house, Amy and I were always alone, even when there were other people around. Here, we're together, really together." That night, after the kids were in bed, David sat at his kitchen table paying bills. For the first time in months, all the numbers added up. The promotion had made a huge difference. There was even a little left over for extras. Maybe they could go to a movie this weekend, or buy Tommy the bike he'd been wanting. His phone rang. "Mrs. Rodriguez." "Mr. Chen, I have some news about the girls' situation." David's stomach dropped. "Good news or bad news?" "Both, I suppose. We located their father." David waited. "He's been arrested. The federal charges are serious. He'll likely be in prison for many years. He's also lost everything. The house, the cars, all of it. The government seized his assets to pay back the people he stole from. How are you going to tell the girls?" We're not, at least not right away. But there's something else. Mr. Blackwell asked to speak with you. With me? Why? He wants to discuss the girl's future. He's asked if you'd be willing to visit him. David looked down the hallway toward Tommy's room, where all three kids were sleeping peacefully. Amy and Anna had nightmares the first few nights, but lately they'd been sleeping soundly. They were happy. They were healing. Mrs. Rodriguez, what happens if their father wants them back eventually? Given his situation, that's very unlikely. But Mr. Chen, there's something you should know. If you're willing to go through the full adoption process, and if Mr. Blackwell agrees to give up his parental rights, you could become their legal father permanently. David felt his heart racing. Adoption, making it official, giving Amy and Anna the stability they deserved, and giving Tommy the sisters he'd already come to love. What would that involve? More paperwork, more interviews, more waiting. But based on everything I've seen, I think you'd be approved. The question is whether you want to take that step. David looked around his small apartment. It wasn't much, but it was full of love and laughter now. Tommy's drawings covered the refrigerator. Amy's library books were stacked on the coffee table. Anna's latest cooking experiment was cooling on the counter. Yes, he said without hesitation, I want to adopt them. Then I'll set up that meeting with their father. He has some things he wants to tell you. After hanging up, David sat in the quiet kitchen, thinking about how much his life had changed since that rainy night 3 weeks ago. He'd started out just trying to help two scared little girls get out of the rain. Now he was planning to become their father forever. The county jail visiting room was nothing like David had expected. Plastic chairs, fluorescent lights, and the smell of disinfectant. He sat across from Richard Blackwell, separated by thick glass, speaking through phones that made everything sound distant and hollow. The man on the other side looked nothing like the confident businessman from the newspaper photos. His expensive suit had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His hair was messy and dark circles shadowed his eyes. But what struck David most was how defeated he looked. Thank you for coming, Richard said into the phone. I wasn't sure you would. The girls are my priority, David replied. Mrs. Rodriguez said you wanted to talk about their future. Richard nodded slowly. I know you think I'm a terrible father. You're probably right, David didn't respond. He'd come here to listen, not to judge. I want you to know that everything I did, all the money I took, it started because I wanted to give Amy and Anna everything. The best schools, the best clothes, the biggest house. Richard's voice cracked. I thought money could make up for not being there. Kids don't need the biggest house, David said quietly. They need someone who comes home to them every night. I know that now. Too late, but I know it. Richard looked down at his hands. How are they, really? David thought about that morning. Amy helping Tommy tie his shoes before school. Anna making everyone lunch with careful precision. The way they all laughed together at the breakfast table. They're good. They're happy. They feel safe. Do they ask about me? David hesitated. The girls had asked about their father a few times in the early days, but less and less as time went on. They seemed to understand that he wasn't coming back, even if they didn't know all the details yet. Sometimes. But David, they've built a life with me and Tommy. They call my apartment home now. Richard was quiet for a long time. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. I've lost everything. The house, the cars, the bank accounts. The lawyers say I'll be here for at least 8 years, maybe more. Even if I get out, I'll have nothing to offer them. They don't need your money, David said. They never did. No, but they need a father. A real one. Richard leaned forward. Mrs. Rodriguez told me you want to adopt them. David's heart pounded. If you'll agree to it, yes. I love those girls like they're my own. I can see that. The way you dropped everything to help them. The way you're fighting for them now. You're already more of a father to them than I ever was. The two men sat in silence, looking at each other through the glass. There's something else, Richard said finally. Before everything fell apart, I set up a trust fund for the girls. It's protected from all this legal mess. When they turn 18, they'll each have enough money for college, maybe more. David felt surprised. You don't have to tell me about that. Yes, I do, because you're going to be their father. And fathers need to know these things. But David, I don't want you to feel like you have to save that money for them or worry about managing it. Use what you need to give them a good life. Take them on vacations, buy them what they want. Be the dad who actually enjoys spending money on his kids. Richard, I can't take your money. It's not my money anymore. It's theirs. And if you're their father, Then making decisions about their welfare is your job, not mine. David understood what Richard was really saying. He was letting go completely. I'll take good care of them, David promised. I know you will. That's why I'm going to sign the papers. All of them. I'm giving up my parental rights so you can adopt them legally. 6 months later, David stood in a courthouse wearing the only suit he owned, watching a judge review a stack of paperwork. Amy and Anna sat beside him in matching blue dresses that Anna had picked out herself. Tommy fidgeted in his chair, wearing a tie that kept coming crooked. Mrs. Rodriguez sat in the back row, smiling. Next to her were Miss Parker, the girls' teacher, and several neighbors who had written letters supporting David's adoption petition. Even Mr. Williams from the construction company had come. Mr. Chen, the judge said, looking over her glasses at David, I've reviewed your case thoroughly. The home studies are excellent. The character references are outstanding. And it's clear that Amy and Anna are thriving in your care. David held his breath. Furthermore, their biological father has voluntarily terminated his parental rights and has expressed his full support for this adoption. Amy reached over and took David's hand. Anna did the same on his other side. Therefore, it is my pleasure to grant this petition. Mr. Chen, congratulations. You are now the legal father of Amy and Anna. The courtroom erupted in quiet applause. Tommy jumped up and hugged his sisters. David felt tears running down his face as he looked at his children, all 3 of them. Can we call you Dad now? Amy asked, wiping her own eyes. I'd like that very much, David said. Later that evening, they celebrated with pizza and ice cream in their new apartment. David's promotion had allowed them to move to a bigger place with 3 bedrooms. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. Dad, Anna said as they cleared the dinner table. Can I ask you something? Of course, and do you ever regret it? Taking us in that night? David looked around the apartment. Tommy's artwork still covered the refrigerator, but now it included drawings of 4 stick figures instead of 2. Amy's books were scattered on the coffee table next to Anna's cooking magazines. The place was louder now, messier, more complicated. It was also full of love. Never, David said firmly. Not even for a second. Even when we're difficult? Amy asked with a grin. Especially then. That's what families do. They stick together even when things get hard. What about our real father? Anna asked quietly. Do you think he regrets what he did? David had wondered the same thing. He'd gotten a letter from Richard a few weeks ago, asking about the girls and telling them he was proud of them. The letter was full of regret and love, but also acceptance. I think he regrets a lot of things, David said carefully. But I don't think he regrets making sure you ended up somewhere safe and loved. That night, after the kids were in bed, David sat on his couch and thought about the journey that had brought them all together. It had started with a simple decision to help 2 scared little girls get out of the rain. Now, 15 months later, he was the father of 3 amazing children. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. When he opened it, he saw a photo of Tommy, Amy, and Anna from the courthouse that afternoon, all of them laughing. Below it was a message. Thank you for giving my daughters something I never could, a real family. Take care of them. David looked at the photo for a long time. 3 kids who had found each other and him by chance, or maybe by something more than chance. 3 kids who had taught him that love wasn't about blood or money or perfect circumstances. Love was about showing up. Every single day from down the hall he heard Tommy's voice. Amy, Anna, want to hear a story about when Dad was little? David smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new opportunities to be the father these children deserved. But tonight his family was safe and happy under one roof, and that was everything.